Hey Suhail, how's it going? Thanks for sending in the new version. Let's start off by taking a look. Oh, let's hide my drawings. Nice. Awesome. I think this is a great improvement from previous versions you've sent in. There's some stuff we're going to talk about. A lot of just timing and spacing stuff. I think your posing has come a long way. There's one or two small posing things, notes I've got for you. But mostly timing and spacing. And hopefully some of the things we talk about help out. So let's have a look. The first thing, and it's kind of nice to do in 2D sometimes, is when you use the onion skin in 2D. So if I turn on ghosting on sync sketch, and let's do only for sketches, which is you select here, and I'm going to choose like 3 each way or something. Maybe 3 is too much. Maybe let's do 1 each way. So what I did here was I was feeling a little bit of evenness in this first move. And what I mean by evenness is if you look at this middle one, and ignore the yellow drawing for now, if you look at this red drawing and, oh, ignore that. Let's choose a different color. If we track like this line, so let's get the brush out. Oh, I'm drawing in white, whoops. We track like this line going 1, 2, 3 here. It's a little bit even. The overall mass of it is very much in the middle of those 3 moves. Like, let's draw a dot, dot, dot. It's quite even. And since you did quite a big acceleration on this first frame, I think what's going to work better here is if you bias the next pose instead of having it in the middle. So this breakdown right now of the arm is very much in the middle. So what the note is always to bias aside, and since you were already accelerating quite fast on the start of the movement, continue that acceleration and get towards the next pose a lot faster, and it's going to help it not feel as even and feel a little bit more distinct and interesting in the spacing. So after the yellow one is more so what I would go for, where we're getting there a bit quicker, and as such we're not sort of just in the middle of that breakdown and then snapping into the next pose. Awesome. Cool. That's my main note for that first pose move. The next one, this is a slight posing note. So for me, I think having the head bent this way and the body bent this way is breaking the line of action a little bit. Like it's a little bit wibbly wobbly. Whereas if you were to do it all as one, you would get one clean, clear kind of line of action through the body there. You have the legs and then a clear line of action through the body, which I think would work better. So that's just a head angle change there. The arms and body, I think, are in a good position. Cool. So here is where I want to talk about spacing quite a bit for this middle section. And if I turn on the ghosting again, you'll see I'm drawing lines for this stuff. I think on the way down is where I'm feeling an issue, especially. So if I track, what I'm tracking is I'm tracking like the bottom of this point here, just where that black to white is, because it's like a high contrast part. It's easy to track with your eye. And what I found was so you have this pose still going up, which is fine. And then this pose and this pose have a very similar spacing. So we're starting from a top of a pose, right? Almost like we're starting from a stop. Obviously we're in inertia of gravity, but gravity is taking over. We go from going up, and then we're slowly, the force of gravity, we're going to accelerate downwards, right? So to accelerate, the spacing needs to get bigger between each frame. So between these 2 frames, the spacing is quite even. It's not really accelerating at all. And then you suddenly pop down with a really big spacing here. So your current spacing, it's a bit confusing with all these lines on screen, is here, 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 straight down to here, right? So if I was to draw a line, sometimes it's easy to visualize it as a line between each of these points. Boom, boom, boom. So these first 2 aren't really accelerating. They're just going the same speed, and then suddenly we speed up. So that's what's going to cause animation to feel a little bit jittery and not as clean. It's because we're not following physics. We're not following everything. If it's starting from stop, has to slowly speed up, gets to max speed, and then slowly slow down again. I call this progressive spacing when I'm teaching. So this red one, as you'll see, what I've drawn is the very first pose could be, let's go back to this. The very first pose could be a really small amount we're moving. Then we get bigger, then we get a lot bigger, and then we can get a lot bigger, and then we can slow down on the other end. So when we're doing it, this is kind of like in 2D animation, this would be like a timing chart. So this would be like drawing 1, let's say drawing 6 or something. And then it would be like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something, right? And this is progressive spacing, and that's because the gap here is getting bigger each time. And then let's say the feet contact on frame 4 here, then or drawing 4, then we're kind of getting smaller between each of our next frames. This isn't the timing or the spacing that I'm saying to do for this jump. This is just an explanation of progressive spacing. So it's just something to look out for. And it doesn't just come in the body as well. This arm here goes from this position to this position, and then it doesn't really travel at all, but then it pops out again, right? So we go huge spacing on one frame, which is like massive, this big, right? Huge spacing on screen space. It's going from here to here. And then the next frame, we only travel this tiny amount. But then the next frame after, we travel a bigger amount than this frame. So that's going to make it feel jittery, where things hit walls in between things. There are times where sometimes you'd want that to happen in animation. If something's hitting something and then breaking through, or there's odd scenarios where you might want this, but for this, where it's just a flowing arm that's just following physics and going from one pose to the other, you always want your spacing to be progressive, as we talked about, and not even and not jittery. Those are the two kind of words to avoid, is even spacing and jittery spacing. We've covered even spacing at the start. With that breakdown, was very much just in the middle. We always want to bias one side so that we're progressing and accelerating or decelerating at any point. And we also want to avoid jittery spacing, which is where things suddenly accelerate or suddenly decelerate without naturally coming to a stop and going to the next acceleration, coming to a stop and going to the next acceleration. Now, if you had more frames and this was like land, middle pose, pose out, pose back out, like if this was an extra pose, like a held point, then you could work into it and work out of it. But because you're only got 2 poses there and it's part of one really big move with this big inertia coming down, it just feels jittery. So that's something to look out for. Here, another posing thing. I think we got the same thing with the head here. So this is a separate note now. We're talking about posing again. I think if you had the head angled to the left, you're going to get a clearer spine. And if we get that bum around just a little bit, so we get into that pose, that's going to affect a bunch of these poses before as well as we get into it. Slightly more rotated around with the center of gravity controller, and the head as well can rotate around as well. And that way we kind of see this spine compression in here. This kind of reverse C shape, and that's going to be a really nice contrast from this shape, which is this C shape. When we drop down, if we get into that nice clean reverse C shape there, and that's going to give us that nice feeling of compression of the spine, and the mechanics are going to feel a lot better doing it that way. Cool. So when doing this, it's often what I'm looking out for is, I think the biggest thing for you moving forward with this piece, I think the posing is all really strong. It's just pushing the spacing a little bit, make sure it's not jittery, make sure it's not even. And we're going to talk about timing in a second as well, because I've got a big point of that. I think one thing that's going to help, before I forget, I had one more note here, which I wrote down, which was, I think you're missing a frame, a breakdown out here, and that could be quite a tight ease out on this frame around here. That way, this change of direction, we kind of define it a little bit more. And then you can have fun. The thing that adds a lot of flavor to animation is when one thing changes direction whilst another thing is still going in the opposite direction. So what can be fun oftentimes is if say your legs are still flopping up on this next breakdown that we have. Let's say your legs are still folding up slightly. They're coming to the end of their move, but the overall body is slightly coming down, right? So this point here, sorry, would be lower. Right, so it's not the best drawing to illustrate this, but what's fun about that is it's called overlapping action, which is where one thing is changing direction in one direction whilst one thing is going still continuing in the other direction. That way things have this organic breakup and nicety to them. So when you add this extra breakdown, that's another thing to think about to bring into your work, which is, even though we're going pose to pose and we're working very pose to pose, we can go into that stuff and we can have something changing direction as the other thing is still settling in its position. And then we get this nice breakup, organic feel to things, which I think will help push this a little bit further than the level it's already at. Awesome. So we're going to talk about timing in a second. I'm going to jump into your Maya scene because I think I've got something to talk about. But the main things from the sync sketch to take away are we're talking about spacing a lot. We're talking about posing in a couple places. We're talking about clear, seeing the spine clearly. So we get a clear reverse C to a C shape. That's like a posing thing. And then we're talking about, spacing, jittery. We don't want jittery spacing. We don't want even spacing. And we want overlapping action where possible. So when something changes directions, ideally something still would be going in the opposite direction. So we get that nice organic breakup. Cool. The last thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to jump into your Maya scene to help describe this a little bit more, is, let's turn off the drawings, is timing. So if I do like a metronome, like a beat of this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So each of your poses are kind of hitting on the same beat right now. It's very 1, 2, let's count it through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hopefully that's clear by me counting out. So each of those big pose changes are happening very much on the same beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what we can do is, it looks like I opened your scene and it was in spline. I'm just going to put it back into steps because I think we're still kind of at step stage. I've selected all the controls here. So what we can do is we can play around with the timing a little bit. So we can just, the great thing about working this way, the way I've been teaching you to work, which is by keying everything on each pose and not offsetting things when you're in blocking at least, is that retiming is really easy. Retiming is just about moving poses. Poses is the equivalent of drawings in 3D versus 2D, right? So what we can do is we can move poses around and just retime things by moving them close together or further apart. One quick thing with your camera here, I'm just going to tell you, if you press this cog button and you go to display options, if I set this, this is on horizontal. So when this is on horizontal in film back, when you go to display options, the overscan is the amount of gap between the horizontal edge and the next panel, right? The edge of the panel. So this is the panel in Maya. So if I set this to 1, this is going to have no gap at all. So there's no horizontal gap between that edge and there. What I like is like 1.01. So there's like a tiny amount of gap between the edge, just so I know where the edge of the camera is at all times, but it allows to use a bit more screen space. And then when I play Blast, you don't end up with this big black border around the edge either. You would have like the tiniest black border in horizontal by doing that. So that's like just a technical note I wanted to drop in there quickly. Cool. So I've selected the controls. Let's talk about timing. So what would be more interesting? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, some things are splining. Are you switching from IK to FK and I've not selected the FK? I assume that's what it is. There it is. Let's select it all. Put it in stepped. Gonna deselect. Boom. Cool. So this is what we were seeing in the sync. And I should have all the controls now because I added to my selection the FK controls, I hope. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So how about we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So really quick. Anticipation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, so it's quick, fun anticipation, bounce up, hang time, bounce, bounce. Let's play around with a bit of timing here and let's see what we can get. So I'm just going to grab all of these keys. So right now this first move is on 3s. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so here's a note I'm going to give you which might help you. When I started out, and I struggled with this as well, when flicking between poses, I pressed a hotkey, it's going to load out, but it's going to take a second. When flicking between poses, it's difficult to assess the spacing if the frames are on different frame rates. So here you have every 3 frames, but then every 4 frames, but then every 4 frames, but then 6 frames, and then 4 frames, and then 3 frames, and then 6 frames, and then 2 frames. What I like to do is when I'm going between one pose and the next pose, I will choose one frame rate. So it will either be 1s, 2s, 3s, or 4s, rarely 6s, but we're usually 1s, 2s, 3s, or 4s. That way, when I flick, when I'm toggling between my poses, I know that they're going the same distance when I'm going between one pose and the next pose, and that allows me to more easily track the spacing because I'm not having to account for how much time there is between each frame. It's just, I know this is an even amount of time between each of these frames. So when I flick between them, I know it's easier to track the spacing. I know if this is in the middle, it might be a bit even, or if it's a bit more biased. Hopefully that's a little bit clear for you. I'll quickly show you. So if I put this on threes for now, this first pose to pose move, now when I flick between these drawings, or these poses, sorry, they're the same distance between each other. So if I want to track something like that arm, it's very clear what's happening. So let's do this one on 3 as well. So I'll put this on 9. So we go 3 frames between each of these ones. Well, that's what that helps with is when I flick between them, they're the same distance between each other. So it's very clear. So now maybe you can see that arm really popping up there. So what I wanted to do with that note was just getting this arm. Boom. I might not have everything on the arm selected. I usually use pickers to animate. See if I can grab the shoulder on the top IK here, or FK, sorry. So what I might do is just blend that forward with Animal a little bit. And I'll grab that top FK and just quickly get closer to that next pose. So now when I flick between, that doesn't feel as big a jump, and it feels kind of like the spacing is progression. We're easing out, we're speeding up through the middle, and then we're easing kind of in. Obviously there's not enough frames to necessarily ease in, but hopefully that's a bit clearer. Cool, so let's talk about timing now. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to select the FK controls as well. Boom, boom. Deselect everything. Cool. Or we go 1, 2, 3, right? So maybe let's do that for the first move. We go 1, 2, 3. So let's do this down quite quick. So let's do the down on 2s maybe. 1, 2, 1, 2. I'm just moving those keys over. I have a hotkey for that. 1, 2. So maybe that's a bit too fast. Maybe I want to hold this top pose if I want to go 1, 2, 3. So let's offset. I'm offsetting 3 frames. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put an extra ease in the middle. I'm just going to blend this back slightly. So it's, we're just a slight ease. I'm not going to do, what I would do then is obviously add arcs and do that kind of thing like the workflow I teach. So 1, 2, 3. So now that's got a bit more time to read. 1, 2, 3. And then the 3 is this jump up, which is going to be quite quick as well. So let's get that jump up to the apex of the jump, which is here. So I'm going to bring this all forward. Maybe that can be on 2s as well. So let's keep it on 2s. Again, each pose to pose move I'm keeping on the same frame rate, so it's easy to flick between and see the timing. The spacing, sorry. So that looks a bit fast to me. Maybe we just need one more ease frame at the bottom here before we pop out. So I'm going to do that head note quickly. Is this the head control you're using? I hope so. I feel like this isn't the head control you're using. So let's get that head out of the way just so that we have a clearer line of action through the body. And then here, let's just do a ease into it. Put it in arc slightly. Same workflow. And now I feel like the body is going right and then left a little bit. So I think that's probably the center of gravity. So I'm just going to... Whoops. I don't have a picker, so I'm really not sure what I'm selecting. So that's the center of gravity. Okay. Boom, boom. What's going on? I think it's working. It's just being weird. Don't really know what... I don't know much about this rig, so... Okay, let's just say that. All right, so that's that line of action kind of note, somewhat hit. Could play around with it and push it more. But let's now grab all those controls and all of the FK legs as well. I need a button for all of these controls. Let's just do it with Animbot. Oh, you have it. Perfect. Oh, here you go. So it looks like I've messed with some controls I shouldn't have, but that's fine. Any of these weird in-betweens are probably... I can just delete them, I think. Two, 1, 2, 2. So let's put an extra slight ease in at the end here. That's what I was trying to do. Let's do that. So obviously I would do arcs and spacing, which I'm not necessarily doing here. I'm just doing timing at the moment. But the arcs I would add in. Cool. So that feels a bit better to me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that ending now is maybe the hang time here is a bit too long. I'd still add that first ease out pose that we talked about. A tight ease out. And this is the thing I was talking about with the legs. Maybe they can continue. I'm going to use blend to infinity here, which is Control Alt, just because I'm lazy and I want to have that show that overlapping action slightly. So that can start to ease down, but maybe the chest can continue up, right? So that could be fun. So I'm just nudging it slightly. So this is another part of overlapping action where like the bottom of the spine can lead the top of the spine slightly, which can be fun. Cool. And this pose here is troublemaker at the moment because of that spacing. If I chuck on a motion trail, you can see this even spacing and then this huge jump. So let's put this lower, put this higher. Cool. So now it's just timing. Now we're just holding for too long in the air. So let's clean that up. I want to delete any of these extra, put it all in step. I want to delete any of these extra keys that aren't doing anything. So there's some random ones here. There's a random one here. These keys aren't doing anything in the middle. Just this key. Cool. So let's maybe, when we get to the hang time, we snapped up on 2s. We'll keep that hang time going. I'll spread it out a little bit. Maybe I'll do that on a 4. We could add an extra in between if we wanted to, and then 4 on the way back. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. And then maybe we can snap down on 2s again. 1, 2, 1, 2. 2, 2, 2, 2. 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you see what I mean with the timing? 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now there's like a rhythm break, right? It's not even. If we go back to this version. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's very even in terms of the timing, right? So timing can be determined by, yes, I'm putting my poses close together, but also you're adding more poses sometimes. Timing is a bunch of different things, but it's easy to change when we're at this stage because everything is keyed on the same frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we could maybe have a quick stab at this head note here. So let's just turn that head this way more. And might need the Z as well. Let's do the Z. I mean, I could clean that up better than what I've just done, but that helped with the... If I was actually going to pose it, it'd probably be like here, and we talked about that cog change as well, which maybe we want to be a bit further over and a bit around in Y, just to help with that line of action. The head's going to be jittery now because I did a change on one frame but not all the other frames, but now that I've done that change on one frame I know what I'm aiming for. So we're going from this pose, we're dragging, comes in, so let's just have these come in less, there we go. And then the Y and the Z. What's happening on the Y as we come down? Just kind of drag it this way maybe, boom, boom, let's just do this into here. So this is also progressive spacing, right? You see it in the graph. So when a channel is changing from here to here, we are slowly, very slowly accelerating out a tiny amount, slightly bigger amount, way bigger amount, slightly less amount, slightly less amount, slightly less amount. So this is a bit even at the end, actually. So that's something to look out for. So the same principle that we talk about in here works in the graph, right? And since these are evenly spaced, they're all on 2s, it's very easy to see the difference between them and clean it up where we need to. Cool. And then the Z is maybe a little bit funky as well. So let's have a look at the Z. So here we were hanging. We can drag it slightly. We can start to pick up speed. We can overtake. Can get into the next pose. Maybe we can even overshoot slightly. Boom. But now the head rotates back around too much on this frame. So let's just make sure that that breakdown is kind of within that range. Same thing with the Z. Right. Cool. So the head is a little bit funky, I think, still. Maybe I went a bit too far with this change. So let's just scale it back. Kind of press R and scale it back a little bit. Cool. And then I think the ending needs a few more eases as well. It kind of hits and sticks a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm going to take it to for this review. But hopefully kind of those principles for timing and for spacing are things that help out with you. And there's a little bit of overlapping action stuff in there as well. So we talked about how we can have some things continue in the direction they're going as other things change direction. And you can really exaggerate that at times, you know. Like what can be fun, you can really exaggerate the stretch on this, I think. Cool. All right, awesome. It's a good stage. Keep going with it. And hopefully those notes were helpful for you. Awesome. Thanks, dude. Catch you later.